Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. London, 1815. A season unlike any other, when the peacocks of the Tun would strut with particular vigor after the defeat of that bothersome Napoleon. And what more fascinating display of plumage could there be than at Carlton House, where His Royal Highness, Prince Percival Beaumont, a distant royal cousin, not our good regent himself, dear reader, hosted his annual spring soiree. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a royal prince possessing a fortune must be in want of amusement. And Prince Percival Beaumont, 32 years of age, and possessing both uncommon beauty and the insufferable arrogance that so often accompanies it, found his amusement in the most peculiar of fashions. Chess, not the sport of choice for most gentlemen of breeding, who preferred their entertainment with cards, dice, or the racing of particularly fine horses. But our Prince Percival was ever the intellectual, you see. His golden curls and azure eyes might have made him the prize of the marriage mart, but it was his mind that made him dangerous. And bored. Oh, so terribly bored with the simpering debutantes thrust before him season after season. Another game, Your Highness? Lord Halsey inquired, having just suffered his third defeat of the evening. The prince sighed, examining his manicured fingernails with the disinterest of one who has tasted every delicacy and found them all wanting. I confess, Halsey, your mediocrity exhausts me. I must pause here, dear listener, to note that had any gentleman of lesser rank made such a remark, dueling pistols would have been immediately arranged for dawn. But Prince Percival's royal blood afforded him the luxury of incivility, which he dispensed as freely as a vicar's wife distributes pamphlets on temperance. The assembled gentlemen and ladies tittered nervously behind their fans and quizzing glasses. The Dowager Countess of Lichfield, a woman whose bosom was as expansive as her fortune and whose daughter remained stubbornly on the shelf after 4 seasons, stepped forward with determined brightness. Perhaps Your Highness might consider a more suitable opponent? Her eyes darted meaningfully to her daughter, who clutched a handkerchief and looked as though she might faint from the sheer possibility of royal attention. Madam, the prince replied, swirling the brandy in his glass, I have played against every gentleman of note in London. Unless you suggest I challenge the regent himself, I fear I am doomed to endure mediocrity. It was then that the incident occurred, the moment that would set tongues wagging from Mayfair to Bath for months to come. A maid, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, paused ever so slightly at the chessboard. Her eyes, which witnesses would later describe as being the precise shade of fine cognac, or like autumn leaves in the late afternoon sun, the Tun, if nothing else, excels at poetic hyperbole, scanned the board with unmistakable interest. Now, a proper servant knows better than to reveal any thought more complex than dutiful obedience. Yet this maid, Katherine Bainbridge was her name, though none present knew it yet, committed the unpardonable sin of allowing her lips to curve into the ghost of a smile. Prince Percival, with the keen eye of a predator sensing movement in the underbrush, caught that smile. You find something amusing? He inquired, his voice silky with danger. The room fell silent. Even Lady Featherington's infamous lapdog ceased its incessant yapping. The maid cursed perfectly, too perfectly, some would later whisper, and kept her eyes downcast. Forgive me, Your Highness. I meant no offense. Yet offense was taken, he replied, leaning back in his chair. Perhaps you believe you could arrange these pieces better? A collective intake of breath followed this remark. The Countess of Lichfield looked as though she might swallow her pearl necklace whole. I would never presume, Your Highness, the maid replied. Come now, the prince continued, warming to his new entertainment. Enlighten us with your serving-class wisdom. I insist. Oh, my dear listeners, had our prince any idea of the storm he was inviting, he might have retreated to his hunting lodge in Sussex and barricaded the doors. If Your Highness insists, she said, placing her tray on a nearby table with deliberate care. She approached the board, keeping a respectful distance. The knight, she said softly, would serve better 3 moves hence. Prince Percival's eyebrows rose so high they threatened to disappear entirely into his hairline. You play chess. The incredulity in his voice could have filled St. Paul's Cathedral. My father taught me, Your Highness. Your father? And was he the royal chess master, perhaps? The prince's mockery drew appreciative chuckles from the onlookers. He was a groom, Your Highness, in service to the Earl of Windermere. The prince's smile grew predatory. How fascinating. A groom's daughter who plays chess. Tell me, do you play well? Here, the maid hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, every matron in the room knew with the certainty that comes from decades of social warfare that something momentous was about to unfold. I manage, Your Highness. Then perhaps you would honor me with a game? The prince gestured to the empty chair across from him. Unless you fear to lose? Percy, Lady Henrietta Monmouth hissed, forgetting herself in her shock. You cannot possibly. I can and I shall, the prince declared, evidently delighted by the scandal he was creating. In fact, I shall make a declaration. What is your name, girl? Katherine, Your Highness. If this Katherine can defeat me at chess, I shall. He paused, savoring the moment. I shall marry her. Gasps. Swoons. Lady Featherington's dog resumed its yapping with renewed vigor. The Duke of Westmoreland, the prince's oldest friend, leaned forward. Percy, have you lost your senses completely? Not at all, the prince replied, eyes never leaving Katherine's face. I am merely offering an incentive. A prince's hand in marriage. What serving girl wouldn't sacrifice her dignity for such a prize? Of course, he added with a cruel smile. She hasn't the slightest chance of winning. Katherine's face remained impressively blank, though a keen observer might have noticed her fingers tighten slightly on her skirts. And if I lose, Your Highness? If you lose? Why, you return to your duties, of course, with the knowledge that you dared to reach beyond your station and failed, as was inevitable. The prince's challenge hung in the air like the scent of expensive perfume, intoxicating and slightly nauseating. I accept, Katherine said simply. And so the board was reset, the pieces arranged, the spectators crowding closer with the bloodthirsty anticipation normally reserved for executions at Tyburn. White moves first, the prince said generously, gesturing to Katherine's pieces. I feel compelled to mention, dear listener, that what followed has been recounted so many times, with such variation, that one might question its veracity. But I assure you, I have consulted multiple sources, including Lady Featherington's lady's maid, who has the most remarkably accurate memory, and what I tell you is the truth. Katherine moved her king's pawn forward 2 spaces. The prince responded by moving his king's knight. Katherine moved her queen diagonally to h5. The collective breath of the ton caught. Even those who did not play chess recognized the boldness of the move. Prince Percival frowned, then moved his king's bishop's pawn forward 1 space. With precise, delicate movements, Katherine placed her queen on the f3 square. Checkmate, she said quietly. Silence. Absolute silence, broken only by the Duchess of Rutherford fainting dead away onto an unfortunate footman. The prince stared at the board, then at Katherine, then back at the board. His face had gone quite pale beneath his fashionable tan. Impossible, he whispered. I believe it is called scholar's mate, Your Highness, Katherine replied, her voice steady. Or sometimes, the 3-move checkmate. The prince rose abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You cheated. You must have. How? Precisely. Could she have cheated? The Duke of Westmoreland asked, examining the board with newfound respect. I watched every move. The game was fair. She must have studied the board before we began, the prince insisted. She knew my strategy. Your strategy, Katherine said with maddening calm, was to underestimate your opponent. A common error, but a fatal one in chess. The prince's eyes narrowed. Who are you? No maid plays chess with such skill. And here, dear listener, is where our tale takes its most delicious turn. I am Katherine Bainbridge, she said, rising from her chair with a grace that suddenly seemed far too refined for a servant. Daughter of the late Viscount Bainbridge of Thornfield. The name rippled through the assembly like wind through summer wheat. Bainbridge of Thornfield, one of the oldest families in England, fallen on hard times after the death of the Viscount 3 years prior. That's impossible, Lady Henrietta declared. The Bainbridge girl was sent to live with relatives in Scotland. Katherine agreed. But my aunt's household could not support another mouth to feed. I chose to make my own way rather than burden them further. As a servant? The prince's voice dripped with disbelief. As an honest woman earning her bread, Catherine replied, a flash of steel entering her voice. Something you, Your Highness, have never had to contemplate. The prince's face flushed with anger, then, to the astonishment of all present, cleared into an expression of dawning respect. You deliberately played me for a fool, he said slowly. I merely accepted your challenge, Catherine replied. Though I confess, I did not expect to win quite so efficiently. A strange sound emerged from the prince, a bark of genuine laughter. Masterfully played, Miss Bainbridge, he said, offering a small bow. Both the game and the deception. The assembled nobility exchanged glances of confusion. This was not how a royal tantrum was supposed to proceed. However, the prince continued, straightening his already impeccable waistcoat. I find myself in a rather awkward position. I have made a public declaration that if defeated, I would offer marriage. Your Highness need not concern himself with such rash promises, Catherine said quickly. I sought only to teach a lesson in humility, not to trap you into an unwanted alliance. And there, the prince replied, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. You have taught me another lesson. For what noblewoman of my acquaintance would release me from such a promise, when it would secure her a coronet? Catherine met his gaze steadily. Perhaps because I value genuine affection above titles and wealth. How refreshingly novel, the prince murmured. Then, more loudly, I propose a compromise, Miss Bainbridge. Not marriage, yet, but permission to court you properly, as befits your station. The room erupted into chaos. Lady Featherington's dog began a howling so mournful one might have thought the apocalypse was upon us. The Dowager Countess of Lichfield consoled her weeping daughter while simultaneously attempting to determine if the Bainbridge family still held their seat in the House of Lords. And the Duke of Westmoreland simply poured himself another brandy, muttering that he'd always said Percival would either die a bachelor or marry the most unsuitable woman in England. As for Catherine and the prince, they paid no mind to the commotion, locked as they were in a silent negotiation far more complex than any chess match. I accept your compromise, Catherine finally said, on one condition. Name it. The prince replied, the corners of his mouth twitching in amusement. That you acknowledge I won fairly, and that you were thoroughly and completely outplayed. The prince's eyes widened, then crinkled with genuine mirth. Miss Bainbridge, he said, taking her hand and raising it to his lips. I concede defeat absolutely, and with all humility. You have checkmated me in every possible way. And so began the courtship that scandalized and captivated London society in equal measure. The prince, it transpired, possessed hidden depths beneath his arrogant exterior, including a genuine talent for mathematics and astronomy that had been overshadowed by his royal status. And Catherine, freed from her servant's disguise, revealed herself to be not only brilliantly intelligent, but possessed of a dry wit that matched the prince's own. Their chess matches became legendary, with invitations to observe them more coveted than tickets to Almack's. Catherine won as often as she lost, and the prince's delight in her victories was as genuine as his determination to improve his own game. 6 months to the day after their first match, Prince Percival Beaumont arranged the pieces on a special chessboard carved from ivory and ebony, a gift from the regent himself. Your move, Catherine, he said, gesturing to the white pieces. Catherine studied the board, then looked up in confusion. Percy, the pieces are arranged incorrectly. Are they? He asked innocently. Perhaps you should rearrange them. With a puzzled frown, Catherine began adjusting the pieces, only to find a diamond ring nestled where the white queen should have been. I find, the prince said softly, dropping to one knee beside her chair, that I no longer wish to play against you, but rather to have you eternally on my side of the board. Will you marry me, Catherine? Not because of a rash promise or a game, but because I love you with all my heart. Checkmate, Catherine whispered, tears gleaming in her eyes as she slipped the ring onto her finger. And yes, Percy, 1,000 times yes. Their wedding, held the following spring at St. George's in Hanover Square, was attended by the cream of society, many of whom still recalled with awe the night a serving maid had checkmated a prince in 3 moves and changed the course of both their lives forever. As for whether the new Princess Catherine has continued her chess mastery, I can report with absolute certainty that the royal chess set sees frequent use. Though rumor has it that these days, the royal couple often find their matches interrupted by more intimate pursuits. But that, dear listener, is a tale for another day. And so we conclude our story of how pride was humbled, station transcended, and true love found across a chessboard. What unexpected checkmates await in your future, I wonder. Until next time, this is your faithful chronicler of the ton's most scandalous affairs, bidding you adieu.